Welcome to the Value Driven Brand Podcast, where you'll learn insights on how to communicate with authenticity, deliver genuine value, and create a memorable experience across your entire customer journey, helping your business become the sought-after leader in your industry. I'm your host, Aileen. Now, on to the show. G'day everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Value Driven Brand Podcast. I am your host, Aileen, and today I have one of the most special guests that I have had on the podcast so far. It is my absolute pleasure, privilege, honor to have this man on the show today, and I'm so looking forward to you all having the capacity to listen in to the pearls of wisdom that are going to come from him. And without further ado, I want to introduce you to the one, the only, Michael Schneider, the Managing Director of Bunnings Warehouse, Australia, New Zealand. Thank you so much for joining me today, Michael. How are you?
I am very well, Aileen. Lovely to catch up with you, and really excited by the opportunity to have a chat with you today and catch up and share a few ideas.
I love it. It has been a while, and for those of you who might not know, I used to work with Michael back in the day in Bunnings, and this man is probably the key person of influence for me when it comes to understanding and executing a customer experience in business and in life. I have many a thanks to go to this man, and many of my clients have him to thank for me doing what I do these days as well. I want to let you know that it is an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited. But for those of you who might not know who Michael is the Managing Director of Bunnings Group, and I can't believe it's been 3 years already that you've been in the role as Managing Director.
It's gone pretty fast, and in COVID years, it's probably feeling like 20 at the moment. So,
Touche. So, Michael, give us a little bit of the inside scoop. What was going on before becoming the MD of Bunnings Group?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting career. I categorise it as a bit of a patchwork quilt, to be honest, Aileen. I think started my retail career as an 18-year-old leaving school. I think like a lot of us did, weekend casual, pushing trolleys, punching checkouts, moving stock around. But I worked out that I really liked the environment. I liked the team, and I certainly loved working with customers. I went off to university because I thought professionally I wanted to become a teacher, but I realised that wasn't for me. When I did some prac teaching and realised that with the environment that I was in retail made a lot of sense. So I did that for quite a few years, working for Target up in New South Wales.
Oh yeah.
And then left retail, got a bit frustrated. I think sometimes when we're early in our careers, ambition and ability can collide, and you can think you're ready for things that maybe your employer doesn't. So I backed myself to do something different, went off to work for Westpac, which I did for a few years, and had the opportunity to work in retail banking, business banking, strategy, finance, and HR. So really interesting time. And as a part of that, moved from Sydney to Perth, and then Perth to Melbourne. And when I was in Melbourne, I realised that banking was really good, and I had fantastic opportunities, but it wasn't where my heart was. My heart was very much in retail. So I joined a business called the Warehouse Group, which is a New Zealand retail business, and worked with their Australian arm while they had that from around about 2000 to 2005. And as a part of that, moved back to Sydney, did a bit of work in New Zealand, and then it was a business that was struggling in Australia. So they made the decision to sell to private equity, which was great for Warehouse Group shareholders. But, when you think about your career and your values, private equity, for me, just wasn't a thing back in that time. And a recruiter that I dealt with had said, "Hey, look, there's a job going at Bunnings if you're interested in that." So just over 15 years ago now, I came on board and ran the New South Wales operations team for a couple of years, and moved down to Melbourne, where we worked together while I was looking after operations from a national point of view. And then, at the start of 2016, took over as MD of Bunnings for Australia, New Zealand. And then for some of your listeners, you'd know that we had a business for a little while in the UK. So we had that operation, which I was responsible for from about mid-2017 till we sold it, ironically, to private equity in the middle of 2018. And ever since then, I've been working on ways to grow Bunnings into the business that it's known for today. Yeah. So that's sort of the history, if you like.
Wow, what a career. I can absolutely comprehend the patchwork quilt analogy now. Banking, retail.
Yeah, it's good in a way, though, because, you learn different skills and you solve problems from different directions. And I think sometimes when you're starting out in business, people tell you that you need lots of people or lots of skills, but sometimes if you look within yourself, you'll find you've solved those problems in a different setting. And that's what business leadership's about. It's taking risk and solving problems. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So that is a pretty amazing career. And I'm curious, it's been a while since we've had the opportunity to catch up. What has been the highlight for you going from the GM of operations to the MD of the whole company?
Yeah, look, I think I've probably got one of the luckiest jobs in corporate Australia. We're owned by Wesfarmers, so we don't have all the burdens of a listed enterprise in our own right. We do a little bit with the market, with the Wesfarmers investor relations team, but really we get to focus on the two most important things in a retail business: your team and your customer. And we're pretty focused on both of those very tightly, looking after the people that we're fortunate to work with. There's over 48,000 people these days working across Bunnings, across, probably about 400 locations when you add in offices and DCs and our store and trade centre network. And, I think, it's a real privilege. And I think, responsible for growing the business means you're helping people who are shareholders in your company, earn an income. And Wesfarmers has a very high retail shareholder base. So we know that for a lot of older Australians, it's part of their retirement portfolio and creating jobs for people. And I think, at the moment, well into 2020, there's lots of talk about, businesses under pressure and closing, and that puts pressure on families and jobs. So the more we can continue to drive that outcome, then we're supporting, thousands of Australians, their families, their kids, mums and dads to have a job and earn an income, which is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I have still, lifelong friends that are still part of the Bunnings group. And, the consistent feedback at the moment is you wouldn't want to work anywhere else with everything going on at the moment, and the way in which the business has reacted, or not necessarily reacted, but taken that and worked with the team to come out with the best outcomes is, my hat goes off to you. It cannot be an easy role to try and satisfy 44,000 people, but by all means, it sounds like you're doing a bang up job.
Yeah, look, I think it's pretty fair to say that, it's hard to be happy, and it's hard for all of us to be happy all of the time, and there's been a lot of pressure, but you're right. There's lots of people put down roots and grow their whole career at Bunnings and stay really long periods of time. We've had execs and team members across our business with 30, 40, 50, even 60 years of service in the group. And I think that's remarkable, but it brings a really strong degree of teamwork and friendship. And you're right. I think, we've all got, anyone that's been a part of the Bunnings team, ends up with a whole Bunnings family group of friends that, tend to sort of stick with you for life. And I think that's a really nice thing. And it's also a good litmus test for leaders in the business, because I think that network is quite broad, and you bump into people all the time who know someone who works at Bunnings, and it's a great way to hear, whether the team are happy or not happy or worried. And it's been a pretty uncertain time, so there's been plenty of worry, and we've worked hard to engage the team, to make them feel safe and to understand what's going on and what's going on from a government level. So, and what it means for us as a business, which across Australia and New Zealand at the moment, it's about 8 different ways of operating, from the lockdown that you and I are living in here in Melbourne to, almost life as usual if you're living on the west coast of Australia.
If you've ever seen adaptability, or if you've never seen adaptability, folks, you're looking at it right now. It's pretty amazing.
Pretty wild. Yeah, pretty wild.
Yeah. Well, this is the Value Driven Brand podcast. And as we know that every guest that attends and gives us the privilege of their time on the podcast is here to share with us their insights and their experiences as to how they have gone out and created their own value-driven brand. And I know I might be a little bit biased, but to me, there is no other, this brand, Bunnings, is the epitome of what value means to customers and consumers. So, Mike, we talked a little bit earlier about some of the points that you believe create a value-driven brand. And one of the first things that you talked about was getting a team with the right skills to pivot where needed. Talk to me about what that means and what does it not just mean, but what does it look like?
Yeah, look, I think, when we started this year, I think we all heard about a flu bug somewhere else in the world, and life went on as normal. The Australian Open tennis was on, the plans were underway in Melbourne for the Grand Prix. And then suddenly, borders around the country were shut. People needed to start quarantining when they came home. Government, for all the right reasons, started to put restrictions in that probably for all of us, or for most people alive in Australia, wouldn't have ever seen before. Maybe a very small number of Australians who lived through Second World War or the Great Depression have seen some of the things that we've had to encounter as a community, and businesses had to respond. We're allowed to open, under most circumstances, but if a government says, hey, we need you to close for these reasons, then, obviously you need to listen and do what's asked. But, we'd embarked probably early 2018 on our online offer. It was something that as a business we were, it wasn't on our growth agenda, probably heading into sort of 2017, but as we started to wind up our operations in the UK, we were looking for opportunities to grow, but also opportunities to make shopping more convenient for our customers, and online's clearly an area where we needed to invest. So, we started that journey, and fortunately, we're at a point of sophistication where start of 2020, we're able to actually pivot some of those ways of operating our online offer to create things like our drive and collect model, to implement, pick-up kiosks, pick-up lockers, all sorts of different things to really focus on the convenience piece for customers, but also understanding that, when you're spending really long periods of time at home, and I know in Victoria, that's being mandated by the government, but it's clear right across Australia and New Zealand that, when you can't travel interstate or internationally, and, it's a bit risky to be going out too much and going to venues with large crowds, then spending more time at home makes sense. So making sure our advertising creative, our in-store processes, all of these things were repositioned to really lean into the fact that as Australians and New Zealanders, we see home as the safest place we can be, and we know that if we're doing things at home, we're active physically, that's got positive mental health benefits. And a lot of fun, just getting stuff done, making your home feel really nice, setting up a home office, home classrooms with a lot of learning from home, which I know you've had to endure. Fortunately for me, my kids have grown up and it's not been a battle, but it's been a battle for plenty of the mums and dads across the Bunnings team. But, all of those things meant, our office team needed to think differently. In fact, functions in Bunnings that we never thought could be work from home, like our payroll or accounts payable or design teams, suddenly found themselves working from home. And we've learned many new ways of working flexibly and connecting and engaging with one another. Really ramped up our effort on communication, really ramped up our effort on team engagement, so that we had things to laugh about and laugh at, over what's been a pretty challenging time. So, I think it's tested our agility muscles, and I think they've been found to be in good shape. And as the year goes on, I think we're seeing our resilience muscles getting challenged a bit as some of these restrictions continue on, but it means that as a business we can test and learn a lot of new things. We're operating our business in Melbourne in a 2-speed way. If you're a trader, you come in just like always, but if you're a retail customer like you or I, you can buy it online, you can pick it up in the car park or have it dropped in your boot, or you can have it dropped home, and that arrangement of choice for our customers wasn't there 2 years ago, and we're very lucky it's here today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think pivoting has been used as such a loose term to just a slight variation in how people do business. But ultimately, you guys in the group have had to pivot. Like, you've had to make monster changes to the way you do business. And I think one of my fondest memories, you probably wouldn't know this, but one of my fondest memories was, I remember working on a project with you, and I was 5 seconds away from presenting it and saying ta-da, and I was looking for the praise, and I was looking for the excitement in your face to say, Aileen, this is fucking amazing. We can beat that out later. But, and then I remember you walking up to me and you said, that project? And I'm like, yes. And you went, scrap it. We're moving. I'm like, no. Do you know how hard I worked on that? No. But
and
that moment, I went, this is pivoting.
Yeah, and that's, for anyone, particularly starting a business, I think you start with a vision in your mind of how a business is going to work. And it might be the same as planning a holiday. You sort of have visions of palm trees and beaches, or, Roman ruins, or whatever it's going to be. But it's often different in reality. And business is very much the same. I think, if we've started a small business as an example. It's called Kitchen Collective. It's a kitchen design studio, and it's taken us probably 12 or 18 months to do the thinking on how we wanted to go to market with that. And, that opened at the start of March. Not necessarily, with hindsight, the best time to launch a kitchen showroom that leans into customers that are wanting to spend more than perhaps they'd have thought of buying a kitchen from Bunnings before. But we didn't see COVID coming. No one saw COVID coming, and no one understood the impacts. And I think one of the biggest challenges leaders sometimes face is hanging on to an idea past its use by date. And the use by date may even be, as you just said in that example, not even getting started, because business does move at pace, and it is really important that we're open-minded to the fact that customers and the market should be the only things that influence our thinking when it comes to our offer.
Yeah.
And if an offer isn't right, then people won't shop. Or if an offer is better somewhere else, people will leave you. And you see that in your local neighbourhood when your local takeaway shop is your favourite one, and if one turns up that is better, or if the coffee shop next door to yours starts serving better coffee or something like that, you're under pressure. So as business leaders, we've got to continue to adapt and evolve all the time. Do the best you can to think what the future might look like, but accept that we'll always be out by a margin of error. Sometimes it'll be a big margin, and sometimes it'll be pretty close. But the one thing I do know after close to 30 years in business is it's always changing, and at an exponentially fast rate right now in 2020.
Yeah, I would definitely say that was one of the most poignant lessons in business I had at that point. And when I went into business for myself, it has become and continues to be one of the biggest lessons that I pass on, that, don't get too attached, because things change so fast that what you're winning with over here will be tomorrow's opportunity to improve. So it was an amazing lesson, and something that obviously Bunnings as a team continues to live and breathe, which is, fantastic. The second thing that you talked about was a willingness to embrace agile work practices. Now, I'm very curious to hear how this is going for you, because A, you have tens of thousands of, or hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, 44,000 employees, team members. This cannot be an easy feat. How do you work it?
It's not. It's a really important point you make, Aileen, because Agile working, at its core, it's teamwork. It's cross-functional teamwork, and Agile's the name. And there's plenty of consultants out there that'll put really trendy names around what these areas do. Scrum teams, Scrum masters, Kanban walls, all sorts of things. But at the end of the day, what you're doing is bringing groups of people together from different parts of an organisation to, in a very accelerated way, solve problems. We touched on that earlier before. Business is all about problem solving, and having the mix of background in my career, that problem solving, sometimes just you're dealing with it through a different lens. It lends itself to some areas of work. So if you're in a business where you're developing a concept or a model or a product, Agile working is really important. We're going through a significant online re-platform at the moment, so moving onto a new website platform. Perfect environment for digital team, operational team, merchandising team, HR teams to work and collaborate together to get the best outcome.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work as effectively in, say, for example, the Bunnings that we all see, which is our local Bunnings store or Bunnings warehouse. More traditional leadership and operational models work there. So when we started to think about implementing Agile, I was fortunate enough to get to go overseas and look at some companies that had implemented Agile ways of working. And once you understand that it's for certain functions within an organization, you deploy it there and bring that team on the journey. But then on the other side, you sort of look at, if you're running a sales business or a restaurant business or something in that sort of customer facing space, more traditional models at this point in time continue to be, certainly in my view, the more effective way to sort of run those operations. So it's a bit of a two-speed. So if you're running a Bunnings warehouse, you're probably running it not dissimilarly to how we have for the last 25, 26 years. You're working in some parts of our support functions. It might be very different with that cross-functional teamwork operating in a more significant way.
Yeah. And how have the teams that have moved into a Agile manner of working, how have they adapted to the changes? Because I know from experience they're two very different ways from how they used to work to how they now work. How's that change management piece kind of played out for you guys?
Yeah, and I think it's a really good observation you make, Aileen, because it is a constant sort of change. It was not easy at the start because, from your time working in the organisation, we very much were built around divisional structures within the business, so buying division, operational division, marketing division. But what became clear was to achieve the sorts of outcomes we needed and to achieve them at the pace we needed to take it on, that different way of working was needed. It isn't for everyone. Some team members have come in and kind of gone, not comfortable, I can't see myself working in this way. And others have come in and, perhaps even team members that I might not have thought would have embraced it on a first blush. We really relied on an individual's technical skills, and that's why they were selected for a project. They've really embraced it and actually taken the sort of thought back into roles that they've moved back into. So I think it's now a much more normal way, and fascinating as it is to sort of think about Agile working as something new and different. The way the years played out and the way that we're all now working, from working from home, or some people tell me it's like living at work at the moment because it's pretty busy.
Yes.
Agile working is actually one of the best ways to go because we can move things through process far more quickly than we would have otherwise done in a more traditional way, where one function would work on something, bring it to the table, and then another function would say, you haven't thought about A, B, and C, and they'd go away and come back and go away and come back. So I think it's really helped us pivot and move at pace in the way we've needed to. So not easy to get started. Once people become comfortable with it, very, very different outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a few experiences where clients want to work in an Agile environment, but they in my mind, they're probably doing it for the wrong reasons. They want to take on that lean project management as opposed to the, what I perceive to be the purpose behind it, which is, that cross-function teamwork, that all hands in, and being able to, as you said, move at pace and cut that red tape, so that you can create an outcome much faster. Whereas I think, some people hear the lean project management, they're like, oh, I can save money. It's not, in my mind, it's not about saving money by having less people, saving money by spending less time on a problem.
The cost saving is usually in the production of, like what, if you follow lean and agile working in a more formal way, and you can see from the way I sort of described it, try to sort of break some of that down to be very much how it will work best for our organization. But what you really work to is what's called an MVP, most minimum viable product. Now, when I first started hearing that, I thought it was most valuable player, and this was a teamwork award. It's an outcome, right? But it's getting to that point of saying, we've made a pen. Is the pen going to do what it needs to do, which is right? And if the answer to that is that, then you can sort of move on. So that's where some of the cost saving will come from, is pace. And we shouldn't be surprised, because we're thinking about the problem in a 360-degree way, rather than starting out with, is the pen going to have ink, or is the pen going to be black or blue or red or whatever it's going to be. We start with sort of what's the problem we're trying to solve, and then move to that first phase very quickly. So yeah, it's a really interesting way of working, and works for some and doesn't work for others.
Yeah, I personally love it. Coming from a project management background, where the way we ran projects back in the day was very formal, very strategic, very documented, very rigid, and to move into an agile way of working is much more, you feel like you're achieving a lot more because you're seeing a lot more come through the pipeline. So I think that's a fantastic piece of advice around, creating a value-driven brand. The third piece that we talked about was an openness to try new things. Talk to me about what that means.
Yeah, I think one of the observations that I've made of leadership over a long period of time is we're humans are creatures of comfort. We like routine. We like a degree of certainty. Whether it's fish and chips on a Friday night or homemade pizza on a Sunday night, whatever. We find traditions and rituals. It might be going to church on a weekend. It might be going for a run every morning. Business is no different. If business falls into a pattern of doing things, over time, and you sort of end up in a plan, act, review cycle. So you might be setting a budget, you might be running the year, then you might be looking back at performance. And that's a good thing, because that for particularly big organizations, but even growing organizations, that cadence, that rhythm is important, because there needs to be a sense of certainty, and you're not sort of going from, selling cars to selling ice creams overnight. You want to have a sense of purpose and direction. But and I think when we talk about value-driven brands, that consistency is key, right? Because people got to know, what they're buying in a brand or buying in an experience. But the flip side of that is if you don't continually iteratively change, you can get left behind. And I think in business today, particularly for startups, there's so many new things coming along, or for businesses in their infancy. If you don't build in an innovation mindset, you'll come up with something that works. It will be popular for a period of time, and then your customer will move on. And you see that with restaurants, you see it with cafes. They're sort of split into two. There's the sort of old dependables of what we know from when we grew up, the local Chinese restaurant, the local pizza restaurant, maybe the local Thai restaurant. They've all got their go-to dish that, you can always eat. But, you don't necessarily think about anything new. And over time, people will move away. A great example and an Australian innovation was the McCafe at McDonald's. So McCafes were actually developed here in Australia first before anywhere else in the world. And they'd recognised that Australians were moving away from the sort of cafe products that a traditional McDonald's restaurant offered. So they came up with a more nuanced, more sophisticated offer, and they attracted new customers who wouldn't necessarily come in and buy a burger in a thick shape, but they also retained customers who might otherwise have left to go into that cafe scene, and have done it with the usual Macca's highly predictable, very formulaic way of operating. But it is that innovation in your model, and business needs to try it. Some things will work, and then some things won't work, and some things probably sit in the middle. They're not doing any harm to a business, but they're not adding a lot of value. The single biggest challenge that any leader faces in that change process is falling in love with the idea and then sticking with it despite knowing that it's not working. And I think most CEOs in their career will make the mistake of falling in love with something and sticking with it for too long, or inherit a model, believe that the model is, and the mindset behind the model is right, and then fail to make the changes they need to make, perhaps until they're too late, which is quite often why you'll see, particularly in big companies, company go quite well, start to not perform so well, start to perform poorly, management change, wholesale revolution of the organization. The banks have done it, big retailers have done it, and that's expensive for the customer at the end of the day is paying, the shareholders paying, people lose their jobs. So if you can evolve your business as you're sort of going and keep it relevant, that's really important. And the last thing, if I take Bunnings as an example, and I think about young people renting their first home, personalising their space in mum and dad's house, or buying their first home, we'd be failing if they were looking at Bunnings and saying, well, that's where my mum and dad went to shop. We want them to be saying, well, that's where we want to go shop, because the products are relevant, the DIY advice is relevant, home improvement isn't scary. It's not building a back deck and renovating a kitchen, because that's what they've seen when they're growing up in the house, the bigger projects getting done. But it's those first projects. What can you do for a rental property? How can you personalise your bedroom and a study at your parents' home? All those sorts of things are all about staying relevant, and that's been very much how we've continued to drive value, into our proposition is that relevance piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to follow up that relevance piece with a statement that says you can stay relevant because you ask for feedback. And too many times I come across businesses, small, startup, big, medium, it doesn't matter, and they are too scared to ask for feedback. And I would have to say, as the person that was responsible for the feedback at Bunnings for a period of time, at an average of 1,500 pieces of feedback every week on average, that although your business might not get 1,500 pieces of feedback, just one piece of feedback, just being brave and courageous enough to ask the question, what can we do for you? What are you interested in? How did that experience work for you? So that you can learn from your customers and therefore continue to innovate and continue to create those, as Mike said, incremental changes to help your business actually stay in business. As you said, people don't want to shop where it's not relevant to them.
No, and I think it's a really critical point you make, and I think the danger with feedback is that somehow we think we have to act on all of it. And I think one of the things that, whether it's feedback about how you're performing as a leader, or feedback about the product you're developing or selling, or the business that you're operating, feedback is literally a smorgasbord. You take the bits that are relevant and you leave the bits that you don't feel are relevant. Now, if it's constructive feedback and it's consistent on one topic, a product has a design fault, or the price is wrong, or your leadership style is too much one way or another, and you're getting a lot of feedback on the same topic, I'd be saying, where there's smoke, there's fire, so to speak. But quite often you'll look at things, and particularly around leadership style, you'll get feedback from people because they maybe want to see a change in how you work because it might benefit them or it might benefit others. But sometimes we just got to look at why we have some things in place, because often we'll have a way of operating in place as a leader, or a certain feature in a product for reasons that are maybe less obvious to the person who's giving you the feedback. And to take that away could actually deliver an outcome that you're not wanting to be able to do. So I think asking and getting consistent, measured feedback, and as best you can, as unbiased as the feedback can be. And I remember, Aileen, we opened up so many different ways of giving feedback through to your team at Bunnings that we sort of rather get that picture. But it's a bit the same as if you're doing for a lot of leaders, somewhere in your career, you're getting a 360-degree review done. If you ask your best friends and your mum and dad to do it, you're probably not going to get the feedback you need to grow as a leader. You need to get that blended feedback to sort of get it straight, and you'll hear stuff that you go, yep, that's me. Whether you like it or not, that's what you got to look at. And whether it's a product or a business or an individual, if you look at the feedback and go, my gut feel says pretty much the same thing, then you know that there's an opportunity to do something differently.
Yeah, absolutely. I have been doing some research recently, and I don't know if you remember, but a while ago, you would remember Professor Ron Hess, obviously, who is also going to be joining us on the podcast in the future, which is very exciting. So Professor Ron Hess of William and Mary University in the United States was a fond teacher of customer experience of the Bunnings Group back in the day. And I remember one of the statistics that he pointed out to us at the time was that for every one customer that left you a piece of feedback that implored you to do something different or better, basically stating that they weren't happy with some form of the business, that there were 10 who felt the same but didn't say a word and just left. And I was shocked the other week. I was doing some research, and that number has gone from, for every one that sends in a complaint or tells you how they feel that they're not happy, and 10 feeling the same and not saying a word, it's now 26.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, and I think social media has played a big role in that as well. We've now got so many, and I'm always cautious with social media because people don't, you put all your happy images up on Instagram. If you just put something up about feeling down or depressed, people go, oh, I don't want to listen, don't want to know. And a lot of people are very courageous at 10 o'clock at night behind a keyboard and write and say things about people and businesses that they'd never have the courage to say to someone's face. But I think we know it ourselves, right? Like, we know you go to a restaurant and you have a poor experience. The food's not what it needs to be, or the service was poor, or the cleanliness standard wasn't right. You don't go back. Like, for most of us, we're not naturally confrontational. We're not naturally givers of feedback. Quite often it's when you've had a really bad experience where you really know someone and you know they want to receive the feedback. You'll give it. But most of us just go, oh, I just won't go back there. I won't go back to that restaurant. I won't go back to that service station. I won't go back to that supermarket, because we're spoilt for choice. And online shopping for the retail sectors, a huge alternative. And, for people living in Victoria at the moment, you're shopping from your desktop all day long. You get bored of a meeting, you get bored of a document you're reading, something pops up on your social media feed, and you go, I'll go buy that. It's so easy to now move between brands that, to have a value-driven brand is an investment in loyalty, and it's an insurance policy for your business, because people trust it, they rely on it, they understand it, they have an emotional connection with it, and that's critical.
What he said. Yeah, I agree. Mike, you're amazing. I'm so grateful. I'm so thankful that we got the time, or that you could put the time aside to catch up with me. It has been an absolute pleasure to learn from you, to reinforce some of the learnings I've already had from you, and to share your experience with our listeners. But before I let you go, now our listeners would know that every guest that comes onto the show, I ask them quite simply, what is the one song that gets you pumped up for anything? And Mike, I don't know if you've had a chance to watch any of the podcasts that have been released already, but I'm kind of hoping you haven't, so this is a surprise. Because what I want is, well, firstly, I will get you to tell us, what is that one song that pumps you up for everything?
Well, if anyone's watched the movie Love Actually, you will remember a very clear scene where Hugh Grant gets up to the Pointer Sisters, and that time was classic, and starts to sort of get up and move around. And to me, it's one of those moments which the emotional connection for me came from the scene earlier in the movie where he stands up to Billy Bob Thornton, who plays the US president, and says, "We won't be bullied." And that's a whole other area of interest that I have as a leader. And I think for me, you hear the radio announcer sort of play the song for the PM in recognition of the fact that, he has stood up for what he believed in. And to me, it's that emotional trigger in that song that means the most, rather than maybe the dance moves or even the song itself. So there you go.
I am so glad you said that, because Love Actually is one of my favorite movies after Grease. That just goes to show how old I am. And so what we do on this podcast is every guest submits that one song that gets them pumped up for anything. And I love the story behind that. That's so cool. And what I do is I have created our very own Aileen Day official value-driven brand Spotify playlist. So when this podcast is released, you will be able to access the Spotify playlist with Mike's inclusion of Jump from the Pointer Sisters. It is a banger. I agree. It's a great tune. I'm very happy to add it to our what is becoming a very eclectic collection of music from our guests. We've gone from rap to pop to 70s techno. Didn't know that was a thing till now. So it is becoming a playlist for the ages, and at no point will you ever have an excuse to be down in the dumps after listening to all of these amazing songs. So, Mark, thank you for your contribution to the playlist.
My pleasure.
And on behalf of everyone, I want to say thank you again. I cannot tell you how grateful I am for your time this afternoon. I know that in this COVID life, you are one of the busiest leaders in the country. And I am so proud of all the work that you've been doing, and your team and the whole group for their resilience and how they're coping and how they're still continuing to get out there and serve Australia and New Zealand to the best of their abilities. And on behalf of everyone, I want to say thank you.
Very welcome, and thanks so much for the opportunity. It is lovely to catch up, and I'm so excited to see you writing the next chapter of your career in such an amazing way. So congratulations to you too, Aileen.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now, for everyone else listening in, if you want more information on Mike, you can head over to the Wesfarmers website, or you can go onto valuedrivenbrand.com. That's valuedrivenbrand.com, and all of Mike's contact details and information and this podcast will be available there for you to check out as well. And that is pretty much it from us today. I want to say thanks for tuning in. Thank you again, Mike, and go out, provide some value to somebody in your life, because you know what goes around comes around. I'm Aileen Day. Have a fantastic week. Thanks for listening to the Value Driven Brand podcast with your host, Aileen Day. Is your business struggling to become known as the sought-after leader in your industry? Access our Value Driven Brand quiz and special 3-part podcast series to identify the gaps and what you need to focus on first. Go to www.valuedrivenbrand.com/podcast series. That's valuedrivenbrand.com/podcast series. Tune in next time where we discuss more ideas on how you can deliver your own value-driven brand.